what the hell was Apple doing with their iPad lineup this year? And I want to couch this in the concept of I was in an upgrade cycle, like I was looking to shake up my product lineup, and it was largely dependent on what the iPad release strategy was going to be. So I was going to go in with the idea of getting the next iteration of the iPad Pro, which was the M2 one. So they make the announcement, and not only is the M2 iPad Pro with maybe one minor feature no different, and obviously the chip change, to the previous one, the M1 iPad Pro, it's also not really that much different to the A12Z iPad Pro that came out in 2020 or the A12X in 2018. So effectively, it's not any different. And the icing on the cake, which put me completely off and changed my mind, was they raised the price by $200 on every iteration, and they're quoting currency exchange issues with that. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, nah, not doing it. Forget it. I'm done with it. So I then thought to myself, but I still need an iPad for like the note taking. Like I'm using it right now for my timer and notes for the show. And I thought, okay, I've used an iPad mini before and I really enjoyed that. So maybe I'll go for the iPad mini. So I pop onto Apple's website. They've jacked the price of that up by $120 compared to the night before of the announcement. Again, because of currency exchange. And I got even angrier. And so I popped onto Amazon, and it turned out Amazon was still selling with the old prices at a discount. So I got it off. I got an Apple device off of Amazon for the first time, and I got it with the Pencil as well, which was also discounted. So now I've got a 6th gen iPad Mini. Never expected that I would ever be getting one. And the irony out of all of this is that I've now understood that. For me, I think the iPad mini is actually the iPad I should have been using the entire time. And the reason for that is that the M1 laptops and M2 ones now have become so good that the iPad mini kind of, to me, essentially means that it's the best iPad to do iPad things. So I'm not trying to treat it as a laptop. I'm not trying to treat it as a productivity device. It's actually the best one to get, at least in my opinion, and that's my recommendation. But it's funny that their release cycle caused that. It caused me to change my entire thinking. And there's a whole wave of commentary on the internet now that's saying, basically, if you're in the market for an iPad, buy an old one. And we can go into a whole discussion around the new iPad 10th generation. Basically, the recommendation is buy an iPad Air 4 from the previous year because it's functionally better, has the same chip. They've got weirdo stuff going on in that iPad where you have to. They made it compatible with the 1st gen Apple Pencil, which is Lightning, but it's got a USB-C connector, so you have to buy a dongle. But it's not only just that dongle, you have to plug it into a USB-C cable to get it to work. And even when it's plugged in, it doesn't actually work. Like, you can't actually have it plugged in and work on the iPad. So I was like, and then on top of that, like we said before we got on, they're still selling the 9th gen iPad, which has Lightning on it. At the more reasonable price. They jacked up the price of what was supposed to replace it with the 10th gen one. The iPad Air that's currently for sale makes no sense whatsoever. And then you've got these underwhelming iPad Pro releases, which it's better value for money to buy last year's version or the year before's version rather than the current one. So anyway, I got all of that out of my system. I'm convinced that...
What must the sales meeting have been like, Ben, when they made these decisions? They must have all been confused because I've listened to what you've said and it sounds like every model is half of another model.
Yeah, essentially. And you can go onto the used marketplace and buy something that's much better value for the same price or less. So I just don't get it. Like, if you just bring up the the iPad page and you look at it and you go, what the hell am I supposed to buy out of this? Which, for me, that's why when I bought the iPad mini, that one makes the most sense because it's really the only one in its class out of all of the lineup because you're buying it for its size, effectively. So, yeah, it's just weird.
I liked it when there was only one iPad.
And one iPhone, to be honest.
They were good days.
So again, in one sense, I've found a place for an iPad now, and funny enough, I'm using it a lot more. So where I wasn't using my iPad Pro before. The next step is that I actually went out and got an M1 Pro MacBook Pro, the 14-inch, and there's a whole story behind that. It all started with that iPad discussion that I went through, realizing that they were going to progressively start jacking up the prices for everything because of currency exchange fluctuations. So I realized that if I hung around for an M2 Pro version of the 14-inch, when that got released, the equivalent one would probably be another $300 or $400 more expensive because of the currency stuff. So I thought, screw it, I'll just go onto the refurbished website, and I bought one. And ironically, they changed the discount on the refurbished products from 10% to 15%. So I ended up getting one that's effectively worth $4,000 at retail for under $3,000. So Australian dollars. So that was a significant saving. And while I wasn't looking,
Does that come with all ports?
Yep, it's got all the ports on it. And I have to say, and we can have this discussion separately for a longer time, I thought the M1 was fast. Like, in every edge case where I was running into walls with the M1, this just completely obliterates it. And then I kind of wonder, who's the M1 Max chip for, really? Unless you're running 6 monitors and are running, you're doing Pixar effects or something. I just don't know what you would need anything more for, because this thing runs so smoothly. And, there's other use cases like running Windows on ARM under Parallels virtualized, and I can run both of the systems simultaneously, no slowdown whatsoever. It's an incredible machine. But again, it just goes to show that, they screwed with their iPad lineup, and that caused me to change all of my purchasing decisions. So I would save a lot more money. And I just wonder how many other people are doing that, because I see a lot of commentary about it too, online.
Wow. Well, you've been very clear, but I'm totally confused about what Apple's doing. All these products that, I'm sure I could work my way through it. And I'm probably sure most people could actually work their way through it if they took their time. But it's confusing. It's not helpful, and Apple used to not be those things. And now it's wow. To hear your story just now, I'm glad I've got an M1. I'm very happy with it. Thank you. I'll stay there.
I should qualify by saying this is all first world problems. I'm glad I'm in the position where I can make decisions like this. But having said that, they are a extremely rich company. Shall we say, if not the richest in the world. You'd expect a bit better in terms of figuring out a lineup that actually works. And they've been famous for their differentiating sales technique is that we provide simplicity in the experience. And they're going down the route of, like, how do you pick between 2 different Windows laptops at this point?
I think it's safe to say that Steve Jobs would be quite unpleased at the moment.
Do you know what the sad thing is, just to sort of tie it off, is that it probably is benefiting their bottom line, because they're actually selling more. This to me reads like someone was looking at a sales graph. They could tell that if they did X, Y, and Z, that they'd punch out X amount of revenue, and they probably will, just by virtue of flooding the market with more options.
Look, I'm certain that's the case. There's no doubt the sales teams in these organisations really rule the roost. Used to be when Apple would joke about that being the case at Microsoft. I think now we're seeing that sales is king in both organisations.